Hello my friends and welcome back. On this video tutorial we're going to talk about functions in JavaScript. But what it is a function? A function is a block of code that it can be executed many times. It performs some operations and then it returns something back to whatever it called the function. Let's see how we declare a function. First, we use the function keyword. After the function name, into a parenthesis, we write the arguments and then followed the main body of the function. Let me write the syntax here. Syntax, function keyword, function name. The function name is any word that we would like to add here. Here we pass the arguments into the parentheses and they should be comma separated arguments. Okay. And then into a curly brace we write the code. Okay. An example will help us to understand it better. Function, I will name it temp. Okay. Into the parentheses I am gonna pass the value 5, 10, 15. And into the main body of the function I am gonna call the console log and I'm gonna display the sum of these parameters. Sorry. Here I should write the name of variables. num1, num2, num3. And here I add num1 plus num2 plus num3. Okay. So we just created the function temp, which gets 3 parameters, and into the main body we add these parameters together and return and show the result. So, but how we call that function? How we call it? With its name. So if I write temp and into the parentheses pass 3 values, for example 5, 10 and 15, here on the main body we're gonna get the value 30. Instead of displaying the result into the main body of the function, we can return that value. In order to return a value, we use the keyword return plus the value that we want to return. Here we use num1 plus num2 plus num3. And we will slightly change the call of the function because we'll have to create a value. We call it res from result equals the name of the function with the parameters 5, 10 and 15. So now we also call the function, we pass the parameters and we get the result into the res variable. We do that because after that we can use an if statement and check if res it is larger than 50, do something here, else do something. Okay. When we use the return into the function, the execution of the function stops and immediately the code execution goes on the next line after the end of the function. So if here after return write for example alert the sum, this line of code will not execute it. So be careful. Okay, we never add code after the return statement into a function. But we can have more than one returns into a function. For example, if num1 smaller than num2, then return num1, else return num2. Now into the function we check to see if num1 value is smaller than num2, and if it is true we return the num1 value, otherwise we return the num2 value and we get it on the rest variable. So now please my friends, pay attention to the function arguments. Function arguments in JavaScript, they don't behave like in most other programming languages. We don't care how many arguments we pass to a function, and we don't care what is the data type of the arguments that we pass. If we create a function like on line 13 with 3 parameters, it doesn't mean that we always call that function with all the 3 parameters. We can as well call that function with 1 parameter, or with 2 parameters, or without parameter at all. All of these calls are correct and valid. This happens because arguments in JavaScript are represented as an array internally. So we have 1. Functions doesn't care how many arguments we pass, nor the data type. Number 2, we don't have always to call a function with all the arguments. And number 3, arguments are represented as an array internally. So there is an arguments object that acts as an array, and we can access it by using the arguments with the bracket notation, and then a number that represents the number of the argument. For example, if we write arguments and into the brackets 0, this is the first argument. If we write arguments 2, this is the third argument. I'm gonna create a new function here. I will call it arguments, and into the main body I will display the arguments array length. Okay, so here I display how many arguments are passed to the function. Now I will call it with three different ways. First of all, without parameters, no params, arguments with one parameter, okay, and arguments with two parameters. Okay. So here each time we get the arguments array and we read the length. This reads how many arguments we pass into the array. The first time we don't pass arguments, the second time we pass one, and the second we pass two arguments. I am gonna do it a little more advanced, and I will add a for in statement here, as we did on the previous video, where I'm gonna display the argument names that we pass into the function. So for args in arguments, and here into the loop, I will display on the console its argument's value. Console log arguments and display on the web console its arguments value. And in order to understand better the messages, this is arguments, okay, and here it is argument value. Okay. I save it and let's go to see what happens on our browser. Okay, the first time on our first call we don't pass any argument. On the second call we pass one argument, the hello, and on our third call we pass two arguments, the hello and number 20. But how do we know how many arguments we pass each time? Let's say, for example, that we want to pass numbers and add them and display the result. How do we know if we pass one value or two arguments or no arguments at all? Consider the following example. I declare a new function here, which I call it addme. Okay, addme, and I don't pass any parameter here. And on the main body of the function, I use the if statement to check how many arguments the user pass each time. So if argument length equals 1, we want to return return the same argument that he passed to the function. So argument 0. Okay, return the first argument. Else, if arguments length equals 2, we return the sum of the two values. So argument 0 plus arguments 1. Okay, else let's say that write return. Now we are going to return a string instead of a number. Too many arguments or no argument. Exclamation mark. And I create a variable here, result equals admin with no parameter, console log result. Here I should get that message, too many arguments or no argument, because we don't pass any argument. Result equals admin with one parameter. Okay, so we have to get back return the same argument 5, and one last example, admin with two parameters 10 and 50. We should get back the number 60. Please check it on your browser and you'll see the result. Last but not least, keep in mind that we can use interchangeably the arguments array or the arguments names that we pass in a function. For example, I declare the function test me, okay, and I pass here num1 and num2 and num3 parameters. Into the main body, I use an if statement, and here instead of using num1 variable, I can use arguments 0. If argument 0 is larger than num2, return arguments the third argument, num3. This is completely valid, correct, and accepted. We can use interchangeably either the arguments or either the arguments array or the argument names. That's all for now. I hope you enjoyed it. See you on my next video tutorial.